Picture two college friends in India, same engineering degree, same grades, same graduation day. Only one of them ends up doing work that touches artificial intelligence. The other spends his days doing tasks a machine could already do. Same diploma, wildly different future. What decided the difference? A new study out of India says it wasn't skill or luck, or even effort. It was something written down centuries before either man was born. Stick with me here, because this story is going to take us somewhere you don't expect. All the way back to ancient Rome. Because the question we're really asking isn't about coding jobs in Mumbai. It's about who gets to be free and who doesn't. So grab a coffee and let's get into it. The story of AI, ancient land, and the freedom we assume we already have. Here's the study making waves. Economist Kaibalyapati Mishra looked at nearly 500,000 working Indian graduates, hunting for a pattern. Among them, about 83,000 held college degrees. So he asked a simple question. Which of these graduates actually work alongside AI? The answer wasn't random. Graduates from India's historically lower castes were far less likely to land jobs that put them near AI tools. Think about that for a second. Not fewer jobs overall, like just fewer of the jobs that happen to sit next to the technology of the future. Roles in management, software, finance, the ones where AI shows up daily, skewed toward graduates from higher, historically privileged castes. So here's the uncomfortable part. It's not that AI causes discrimination, it's that AI lands on top of discrimination that was already there. And that discrimination doesn't usually show up on a coding test. Research on India's top firms found it hiding somewhere else entirely. The final interview. Family background. Accent. The right kind of comfort in a room. None of it on a resume, all of it deciding who gets the AI-adjacent job. So the two friends from our opening story? Same degree, same test scores. But one walked into a room that already recognized him. Here's the question worth sitting with. If a brand new technology can still sort people by a system centuries old, is it really new at all? Now, zoom out from India because this pattern isn't local. It's the whole planet, and the map of who uses AI looks strikingly unequal. Microsoft tracked AI use worldwide in early 2026 and found the UAE leading at over 70% of working-age people. The US barely cracked 30%. And that's just the top. Researchers at the World Bank found people in rich countries visit ChatGPT about 50 times more often than people in poor ones. 50 times. Not 50% more. 50 times more usage. Let that number actually land before we keep going here. Why the gap? The World Bank points to 4 things. Internet that's actually affordable, useful local data, digital skills, and raw computing power. In poorer nations, a basic 5 gigabyte data plan can eat up nearly half of whatever's left after buying food. Half? Just to get online. And computing power itself is even more lopsided. High-income countries hold most of the world's data center capacity. Low-income countries barely register at all. So it's not just about who clicks on a chatbot. It's about who owns the servers, the chips, the physical machinery underneath it all. Ownership again. Not access. Ownership. Where have we heard that distinction before? Stick around, because history already answered this once. 2,000 years ago, a different kind of technology, land, got concentrated the exact same way. And it nearly tore a republic apart. Let's rewind. Not decades, centuries. To the Roman Republic, a place with its own version of the productivity revolution. Conquered land. After Rome's wars overseas, a flood of wealth, slaves, and captured territory poured back into Italy. Someone had to farm all of it. The wealthiest Romans bought up public land, added slave labor, and built massive commercial farms called Latifundia. Efficient, profitable, and deeply exclusive. Meanwhile, small farmers, often veterans who'd fought in those same wars, found themselves squeezed off land their families had worked for generations. The Roman writer Pliny the Elder later put it bluntly. The Latifundia had ruined Italy, he said, and were now ruining the provinces too. He even claimed just 6 men once owned half the farmland in North Africa. Whether exact or not, it captures how alarmed people were. So picture a young Roman soldier home from war, walking past his old family plot. Except it's not his family's plot anymore. It's been absorbed into some senator's estate, worked now by rows of enslaved laborers he doesn't recognize. Where is he supposed to go? Multiply that one soldier by thousands across an entire peninsula, and you get a republic quietly running out of the citizens it depends on. Sound at all familiar? Same story, different centuries. A new source of wealth and the people already on top getting there first. Someone in Rome actually tried to fix this. His name was Tiberius Gracchus, and his origin story starts on a literal road trip. According to Plutarch, Tiberius rode through the Etruscan countryside and noticed something jarring. Almost no free citizens working the fields anymore. Just chained foreign slaves as far as he could see across the fields. It reportedly shook him and pushed him straight into politics. In 133 BC, he proposed a land law. Cap how much public land any one person could hold and redistribute the rest to the poor. Not exactly a radical idea. The cap had technically existed for decades. It was just never enforced because who was going to enforce it? The wealthy senators holding all that land, obviously. And they were not about to vote away their own estates quietly. According to the historian Appian, the fight escalated fast. Insults, procedural sabotage, and eventually actual violence in the streets of Rome. Tiberius ran for a second term to protect his reform, breaking political norms to do it. His opponents decided that crossed a line. A mob of senators killed Tiberius Gracchus with clubs and broken furniture. In Rome's history, it was the first political murder in generations. A reform meant to save small farmers ended with a body in the street. So, was the reform itself the problem or the delay? Not everyone in Rome saw the Gracchi as heroes. Decades later, the statesman Cicero made the opposite case, loudly and in writing. In his book On Duties, Cicero argued the state's most basic job is protecting private property, not redistributing it, however unequal things get. His worry wasn't abstract. Land that's been bought, inherited, mortgaged, and passed down for generations gets tangled up with real lives. Take it away now, Cicero warned. And you don't just fix an old injustice. You create a brand new one for someone else. It's the classic tension, and it hasn't aged a day. Fairness for the many versus stability for whoever currently holds the deed. Notice this isn't really about land anymore, if you think about it. It's about who gets to keep what they've already accumulated. Swap land for data centers or AI infrastructure. And Cicero's argument slides right into a boardroom debate happening in 2026. So Rome had its reformers and its defenders of the status quo. Sound like anyone we know from today's headlines? More than 1,000 years later, the political thinker Machiavelli looked back at this whole mess and reached a sharper conclusion. In his discourses on Livy, he didn't blame the Gracchi's idea. He blamed the timing. The reform came far too late. By the time Tiberius acted, inequality had been quietly compounding for generations. What could have been a policy tweak had calcified into identity. Land wasn't just an asset by then. It was who your family was, which side you were born on, what you inherited. Try to fix that with the law and you're not adjusting policy anymore. You're threatening someone's entire sense of who they are. That's the real reason it turns violent. Not because reform is wrong, but because waiting lets it stop looking like reform at all. So here's a genuinely useful question for right now. How much time do we actually have before AI's advantages calcify the same way? Machiavelli's warning wasn't really about farmland at all. It was a warning about the clock. And clocks, it turns out, don't wait. This is where the story stops being just about history and starts being about a much bigger question. What does freedom actually mean? Most of us think of freedom as simple. Nobody's stopping me, so I'm free. Philosophers call that negative liberty. Sounds airtight, right? Political theorist Philip Pettit says not so fast. In his book Republicanism, he points to an old thought experiment, the well-treated slave. Imagine a slave with a kind master who never actually interferes with his life. By the simple definition, that slave is free. Feels wrong, doesn't it? Pettit says of course it's wrong, and here's why. Real freedom isn't just an absence of interference. It's the absence of arbitrary power over you. The master could interfere anytime, on a whim, with zero accountability. That possibility alone, not even unused, is what makes the slave unfree. Pettit calls this being dominated, and he says it applies far beyond ancient slavery. To anyone dependent on someone else's unchecked goodwill, a worker whose boss could fire them for any reason at all, a citizen whose rights exist only as long as the ruler feels generous. Real freedom, in this view, needs something more active, the power to push back. Pettit calls it anti-power, the ability to hold power accountable. Keep that word in your back pocket, anti-power, because we're about to need it for something Cicero and Pliny never had to worry about. So bring that idea, anti-power, into 2026 and pointed at the algorithms already running your phone, your feed, your job applications. One researcher, Matthew Hamilton, argues these systems already dominate us in Pettit's exact sense. Not because they always interfere, but because they could. An algorithm can shape what you see, what you buy, even how you feel, and you have almost no way to hold it accountable. Sound like the well-treated slave and the well-meaning master from Pettit's example? That's exactly the comparison Hamilton draws on purpose. And who owns these systems? A small handful of companies, the same companies that, as we saw, own most of the world's computing power too. Data centers instead of farmland. Chips instead of slave labor. But the underlying shape looks eerily like a latifundium built for the digital age. And just like Rome, it isn't only about individuals. IMF researchers warn AI adoption could sharply widen the gap between labor income and capital income, meaning whoever owns the AI capital gets richer fast. Whoever only sells their labor might see their wages barely move or even shrink. So back to our two friends from the very beginning. The gap between them was never really about talent. It was about who owned what. Same story as the senator's estate. Same story as the data center. Ownership, not effort, quietly deciding who gets to be free. So where does that leave us? Rome eventually answered its own inequality crisis, but not with a fix. With an emperor. When a republic can't manage its own domination problem, something always steps in to manage it instead. History isn't exactly subtle about that. So here's the real question this whole story has been building toward. Who holds the anti-power over the algorithms shaping your life right now? Is it you? Your government? A handful of companies who happen to own the servers? Sit with that for a second, really, because being free was never just about no one stopping you. It's about no one having the unchecked power to whenever they'd like. That's a wrap for today. If this one made you think, hit subscribe. History's got a lot more to say about where we're headed.